Thiessen is the former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush and a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Mark, this time last night we were talking about the fact that the president chose to go off to his New York City fundraisers while we were looking at almost 300 dead civilians in Ukraine. And tonight we stand in a different place in that the president did come out. He made extensive remarks. He took questions. Your thoughts on the message he brought?
Well, I was struck at the difference between the tone of his statement and the substance of his statement and what Samantha Power said up in the UN. I mean, good for Samantha Power. She went out there and laid out a searing case against Russia, a searing indictment of Russia, and she laid this directly, the responsibility for this act directly where it rests, at Vladimir Putin's feet. She mentioned Putin over and over again. President Obama mentioned Putin once in his prepared statement, saying that he had spoken to him. She laid this right at Putin's feet.
And just hold that thought for one second, because we have just a little comparison of the two to show the viewers what you're talking about. Watch.
Russia, these separatists, and Ukraine all have the capacity to put an end to the fighting.
This war can be ended. Russia can end this war. Russia must end this war.
Very, very different.
Very different. And she went on to say that Vladimir Putin has come into the UN time and again and promised that he wanted peace. And every single time he has failed to come through, she said he's responsible for this. She laid out details of the weapons that he's been providing. She laid out facts.
How does that happen? How is our UN ambassador and our president, how are they so on different pages?
I know, it's as if she sounded like Ronald Reagan and he sounded like Jimmy Carter. I mean, how is it that we get to the point that we're getting more resolve out of the U.S. mission to the United Nations than we are out of the White House? That's the situation we're in right now. I mean, the president barely mentioned Putin. She lays this all out. She put it right at his feet. Well, this kind of statement we should be hearing from the President of the United States, not the UN ambassador.
And this is relevant because Mark talked last night, if you missed our program, about how you believe that we've stepped back in the world, you believe we've projected weakness, and you believe weakness is provocative. And you raised the question of, all right, so that's where we are, tonight, meaning last night. And now the question is, now what are we going to do? Now how are we going to behave? Are we going to do something differently or project something different? What's your thought based on what you heard today?
Well, exactly. I mean, we're not seeing that shift that we need to see. Look, I'm a former presidential speechwriter, so I know that the president's words are important and they're underwhelming today. But I'm even more less concerned with his rhetoric than his actions. I mean, why did Vladimir Putin feel emboldened to seize Crimea and to arm these separatists who just shut down a passenger plane out of the air? It's because Obama is projecting weakness in the world. His intervention in Ukraine started just a few months after President Obama failed to enforce his red line in Syria.
I know you feel a lot of this dates back to Syria. It starts in Damascus.
Absolutely. What happened in the skies over Donetsk started with American inaction over the skies of Damascus. The President of the United States failed to enforce his red line, that Assad could not use chemical weapons, turned to Vladimir Putin to get him out of it.
You know what his critics say, Mark? His critics say, well, the U.S. Congress didn't, his defenders say, well, the U.S. Congress didn't approve any action in Syria.
Well, first of all, the U.S. Congress doesn't need to improve. He's the commander-in-chief. He can take military action without the U.S. Congress. But also, he had announced that his Secretary of State had announced that we're just going to have unbelievably small strikes. So who wants to get behind unbelievably small strikes? I mean, it's embarrassing. And then, so he then, a few months later, says to President Putin, if you go and intervene in Ukraine, there's going to be consequences. And Putin says, yeah, right. There were no consequences for Syria, and you threatened military action. And so this is why Putin has felt emboldened to do this. And it's not Putin. People are looking at this. The Iranians are looking at this. The Syrians are looking at this. The Chinese are looking at this. North Korea is looking at this. Al-Qaeda is looking at this. And so just as we saw consequences in Ukraine this week that started in Syria, the consequences of inaction now in Ukraine and not imposing consequences might be felt somewhere else in the world. So this is very dangerous stuff. We have to stop projecting weakness or tragedy is going to happen.
People are watching us and they're listening very carefully. Mark, good to see you.